Hi, 5th through 6th grade. So my screen is blank because first I have a couple of announcements. We have 2 weeks left of class. That means only 2 videos. And so at this point in the semester, if you want to stretch out these last assignments for 2 weeks, you may. So if last week's assignment, the persuasive essay, needs a revision, which I highly recommend, take your second week after you've turned it in and create a revision and give it to your parents or your teacher, whoever you're writing for. And then this week, we're going to cover the descriptive essay. And again, you can take 2 weeks, 1 week to turn it in, a second week to revise it. And then the last video will be about how to write a comparative essay. And again, 2 weeks. Turn it in the first week and then revise it the second week. But I'm going to do this week's video on the descriptive essay, and next week's video will be on the comparison essay, and that will be it for the semester. I also recommend to parents, it's a great end of year project to create a newsletter where you compile your favorite essays, paragraphs, articles, and write them in a way, tweak them in a way that fits a family newsletter or some, neighborhood circulation. And as the final project, you can put it in newsletter form and edit it, have your child act as the main editor. It is so interesting to me that when you look back over some of their early works, they are going to find some new things. One of my writing professors would have us do that, and I was shocked at how much I saw after what I had learned looking back. So it's a great end of year project. So you as a student, you can pause this video, rewind, watch it with your parents. You decide together how the schedule is going to look. For my students, we are going to do that. We are going to have our 2 weeks per essay and our end of year project. So we're going to follow the schedule as well. All right, so for today's assignment, the descriptive essay. So something to keep in mind with these last 2 essays, we are still following what I like to call the funnel method. It still applies with these essays. However, they are going to be certain genre of an essay. So this one is a descriptive essay. When would you see a descriptive essay in real life? I'm going to use some real life examples of things I've seen recently in the news. So recently there's a measles outbreak. So maybe I actually read an article describing measles because it's such a rare disease these days. It was all but eradicated, that most people don't know how to recognize it. So it's a descriptive essay describing how would you recognize measles? What are the symptoms? What are the short-term effects, long-term effects? How do you treat them? So a descriptive essay, in this case, you want to find a topic that is easy to describe. But you still want to, for our sake, I want you to pick at least 3 categories. Now, if I'm writing for a real newspaper, I'm not going to limit myself to 3. I might only have 2. But in this case, I'm just going to use, again, measles as the example. I might spend one of my thesis would be a description of measles. And so my sentence trying to avoid be verbs would be something along the line, measles has certain distinguishing characteristics. And so I'm basically saying, I'm going to describe them for you here. And then my first category, of course, once again, I'm making this up. Okay, my first category, I would have a complete sentence outline. I would start off by talking about the symptoms. That's what people really want to know. My second category, I would talk about the long-term effects. Or maybe I would talk about the, what's the word for it? The people who are prone to get it. I forget the term right now at this moment, but maybe I would talk about, the people that are typically high risk. So I might do that instead. And then for the last one, I would talk about treatment. And then I would conclude with a conclusion. So maybe in my intro, I would talk about diseases in general, or I would talk about sick season, talk about the importance of, just being aware so you can recognize things. And then I would hone in on my thesis, which would be the measles. And then I'd have my 3 buckets or my 3 paragraphs, starting off with my topic sentence. I would end with a restatement of some sort about, after this, with this information, anyone can recognize measles. And then I would have a conclusion. Now, what do we not do? We learned this last week. We are not using first and second person because this is not a persuasive essay. Although you could turn it into one. That's not the assignment. But do not use first and second person. Do not write informally. We're not using cliches, idioms, contractions. We are not asking questions. We are not making exclamatory statements. We're not even using what we call imperative sentences, commands, because we're not addressing our audience. We're just writing a formal descriptive essay. All right. So that's the first part of this. The second part of this would be, remember the order in which you describe something is important. Now, every time I teach the descriptive paragraph or the descriptive essay, I always talk about this. It's very important that you not just willy-nilly describe something. Like if you're describing a person, you don't start with their eyes and then talk about what they're wearing and then talk about their hair and then maybe talk about their shoe size. No, you decide ahead of time the order, and you either do top down, you could do bottom to the top, you do directional, or if you're doing a physical description, or I like to use the example of a room, you could start in one corner and go around the room in order. If you're describing an event, always keep it chronological. That's a fancy word for saying always keep it in order, in the order it happened, in time order. If you're describing maybe someone's personality, you would not just list off all your descriptions of them. You would, again, do it in categories. Maybe talk about how they interact with family, and then maybe how they interact with friends, and then how they interact with strangers. So your description would go from the inside out. Again, if you're describing a person, maybe you describe their physical appearance, and then you describe their personality, and then maybe you describe their social standing, what they do, how they do in society, how they work, what their status is. I'm thinking of a lot of books right now, like Charles Dickens, the Narnia series. There's lots of series where they take time to describe a character, and you should go back and look at some of your favorites, and you'll notice that they always follow a pattern, so you can visually keep up with them in your brain. If it's scattered and disorganized, it's really hard to follow. So you want to be intentional about the order in which you describe something. So think about that, not just in the order that you decide to list these things, but also in the order within the paragraph. So if you're doing symptoms, choose a specific order. Don't just list them off. Maybe start again from head to toe symptoms, or outward visual symptoms to inner symptoms, things that we can't see but we know are going on with the disease. If you're talking about long-term symptoms, start with the shortest long-term and go to the longest long-term. Start with the things that last a week, and then the things that might last for a few months, and then the things that might be permanent. If you're talking about treatment plans, maybe start with the least the least difficult, the simple things, drink water, get rest, and then move towards the most difficult, which may be hospitalization, intravenous fluids. So always, always, always plan your paper with great intention. That is the sign of an organized brain, and that is a sign of a good essay. So just some other ideas here of times you might use a descriptive essay to kind of stir up your creativity. But like I said, I thought of the measles article. I recently read an article describing a new product. It was a new accessible medicine on the market, but it's kind of targeted to everyone. And so the article was it started off with kind of a description of why this medicine was so great. And the thesis was essentially, this medicine is beneficial. And then it talked about the benefits of the medicine short term. It talked about the benefits of the medicine long term. It did talk about some of the negatives, but it really minimized them, saying, it was worth it. There wasn't a lot. And then basically, this medicine may be for you, although again, we don't use first and second person, but that was the thrust behind the article. I saw another article describing the president's first 100 days. And again, there's categories, how his presidency has affected, the economy, how his presidency has affected the status of the other politicians in DC and the two parties, how his presidency has affected international relations, and it had several categories, and it was describing these effects of the president and the work he has done. So there are lots of opportunities for descriptive essays. You will see them everywhere. A lot of times they are part of a persuasive type of essay or commercial or presentation. But a lot of times they're just describing something new, something unfamiliar, something maybe, in the case of a presidency, it's kind of a synopsis and a summary for people who might not be following every little thing. So there's a lot of opportunities here. So for you might choose to describe a person. Pick someone who's very interesting to you that you know personally and really well. It could be a grandfather. It could be an interesting friend, or it could be your favorite professor or Sunday school teacher, or it could be your favorite book character. You could also use this opportunity to write a descriptive essay for, let's say, your favorite restaurant. What are the reasons it's great? And your 3 categories could be the quality of the food, the atmosphere of the restaurant, and the accessibility to people. Like, how expensive is it? How easy is it to find and get to? Is it something you have to call ahead to get into, or can you just walk in and sit down? So you could pick your favorite restaurant. You could pick your favorite store. You could describe your favorite board game. You could describe your favorite book series. So these would all fall into a descriptive essay. Now, again, I caution you, be very careful not to make this a persuasive essay. It could very easily become one. In fact, if your mom or dad or your teacher wanted you to, you could write the descriptive essay one week. You could turn it into a persuasive essay the next week by adding in first and second person and questions and exclamations and imperative sentences and all of those fun things that make it persuasive. But for our assignment. We are going to keep it purely as a descriptive essay. So I hope you enjoy this essay. I hope you work hard on it. Again, I recommend taking 2 weeks, 1 week to complete the essay, the second week to revise it. Enjoy.